Welcome to the Craig Brock Real Estate Show, helping you navigate through all the challenges and pitfalls related to real estate. Craig is San Diego's real estate investment strategist. And now, here's Craig Brock.
Good morning, Southern California. Craig Brock here. Hey, we're post the Case-Shiller report that was out yesterday. Showed a nice gain of more than 12% for the national average year over year. Pretty terrific gains that continue. It's a great time to get out of your costly mortgage insurance if you are paying it. And if you earn over $100,000 a year, you can't deduct the cost of mortgage insurance, so it makes a lot of sense to dump it. But there's breaking news out of Deutsche Bank this morning as it relates to what's been happening in the bond market. We've been trying to clue you in on this here for the last couple of weeks. This morning, we officially have bond yields at the lowest level since last July, since July of 2013. So that's setting us up just perfectly here heading into the month of June. On the supply side is what's happened. Bond issuance by the federal government has plummeted 19% year to date. So you correlate this with the short supply and the surge in positioning. Bonds have been taking in money. So what does that mean? That means that it pushed yields lower. And when yields go lower like that, mortgage rates go lower. We're seeing some of the lowest mortgage rates that we've seen in 2014. But that creates a little bit of a conundrum here for a mortgage banker because that means that we want to get out and contact everyone who's closed a mortgage within the last 11 months because chances are extremely high that they can refinance without having to pay points, without having to pay lender fees, even title, escrow, appraisal, notary fees, without having to pay any fees of any kind and get a better rate. And that's basically what I want for you, Southern California. If you got stuck with one of those cash call HARP refinances, it's time to dump it because you can get a better deal. Let's face it, in the heat of the moment, we sometimes make decisions that aren't the best decisions, and you can go back and redo it because mortgage rates have fallen to the low of the year. But other news, I had a gentleman that was in my office yesterday who had gone out to Wells Fargo. He was turned down by Wells Fargo for a home mortgage, and he's gone out to so many different mortgage brokers, all of these mortgage brokers who said that they could do his deal, that they could help him get into a house. He's actually trying to accomplish a scenario where he wants to help his mother purchase a home. His mother lives in Northern California. She wants to relocate here. She's a state worker. And so she's put in her papers to get relocated to San Diego County. But the problem is that she has a current residence that she owes about what the value of the property is. But here's the real problem. She has a loan modification. And did you know that the banks look at these loan modifications as almost the same thing as a bankruptcy? Well, to make the matter worse, she also has a bankruptcy, and she wants to get into a new home. So she's looking for a solution. Well, you're not going to find that solution at the typical corner bank. We're going to get into those solutions that can help you get into a home if you have a similar situation to that. And if you have had a loan modification, there's a lot to know. You want to make sure that you have all of your documentation if you're looking to refinance. It doesn't mean that you can't refinance. It doesn't mean that you can't refinance if you have had a bankruptcy. It just means that you need to be working with somebody that doesn't have a lot of red tape and doesn't have a lot of overlays. You want to work with a mortgage bank that can take your loan right to Fannie Mae and right to Freddie Mac. This morning I want to bring in my co-host. His name is Terry Lewis, who you've heard before. He's with Seller Finance Consultants. And he doesn't do things like the bank. He does things much differently. There is some underwriting involved to help you get into these seller-financed homes, but he's basically turned the clock back, and he's essentially doing things almost the way that they were 30 years ago. So how does that sound to you, Southern California? Good morning, Mr. Lewis. Thanks for joining us here on Financial News and Talk on this Bloomberg network.
Good morning, Craig. It's a beautiful day today.
Well, it's a beautiful day if you're able to get into one of these seller-financed homes. There doesn't appear to be enough of them out there, but I want to get into this strategy. A lot of sellers typically won't even advertise that they're willing to carry back the paper on the property, or maybe they don't feel that they have enough equity to be able to even do that. But there's a lot more to this strategy. Just in a nutshell, this seller finance concept could literally apply to any home out there that's available for sale, correct?
That's true. It takes really, there's not enough knowledge in the industry right now. We've had 3 decades where this really wasn't necessary. Back in the 80s, about 30% of the homes that sold were with seller financing or some kind of a loan assumption or taking over a loan. And so we've basically, history repeats itself, and we've come back to that time now. And what's created it is not high interest rates like the 80s, but an actual inability for practically everybody to qualify for a loan. What good is a 4% loan when you can't get it? And just the best of the best in credit and income and not self-employed people and all the overlays are preventing people from getting loans. And so that leaves just a very small slice of people left that can get a 3 or 4% interest rate. So everybody that's left, I think the industry is looking for alternatives, and seller financing is one of them. And you can actually seller finance any house because you can create a loan that the seller of the house can sell to an investor that might have a 401k or a pension and or an IRA, and actually buy that note from that seller. So there's one more step involved, but it's a tremendous strategy for someone that doesn't qualify or doesn't have the credit, but actually is a good person and a good buyer with down payment and all the things necessary in the past to own a home.
That's just an incredible strategy, and I know I want to get more into that here shortly. Some people might be just waking up to this and hearing this, and they're not really hearing it clearly. This is an invaluable concept to be able to take this concept and purchase potentially any home that's available in America, any home that's in the MLS. But I want to get into some comments that were recently made by the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau director. His name is Richard Codray. I believe you're familiar with what he just said about the effects of student loans. That's really holding this market back. Although you look at the Case-Shiller numbers that were out, and it showed a 12% increase on a national basis. A few markets are starting to see some pullback, in particular Las Vegas and San Francisco. Well, hey, those markets need to. Even the Los Angeles market's pulling back a little bit, but there doesn't appear to be any pullback whatsoever in the San Diego market. But when you look at this debt, the student loan debt, we're talking about $1.2 trillion. And this student debt will have negative ramifications on the housing market for the future. This is just starting. What do you have that you can offer people that have this student loan debt? Is there a solution that you have? Now, I know that there's no panacea, but let's face it, you go into the bank, and if you have 4 or 5 student loans, if you owe $100,000 and they're not deferred, you're talking about a decent monthly payment that's going to prohibit you from home ownership, correct?
That's right, Craig. Actually, the student loan debt is second to housing, to home loan debt. And that's just a tremendous amount of debt. We have students that are actually are people working now that have graduated that have debt that exceeds a home loan, and that's that. And this loan, this money is going to take 10, 20, 30 years to pay off, and the government is not even lowering the interest rate. Some of these loans are at 11%, or it's like usury that the government's putting on the youth of our of today, and and on top of that, you have to pay rent. So seller financing is a huge answer to this. If you have to pay rent anyway, get some help from a parent or pool. When I first bought my second home, I had a roommate that we both bought the home together. and we had an agreement on the side. You can own homes, with seller financing. You can do a lease option to buy. And if you're going to pay rent, at least have a strategy that you'll end up owning a home with it one day. And I'd say half of our buyers right now are actually younger millennials that are saying, that are seeing this, and they're all over seller financing. They're looking at homes and just ready to jump all over it when one comes up.
Now, I do want to ask you about your opinion on purchasing a duplex property. Back to the point about pooling your money together and buying a home with your roommate. Some of us have had roommates in the past, down in Pacific Beach, and these are certainly no people that I'd want to own a home with by any means. They couldn't even get up and make it to work, so they might not be the best qualified. But how about the scenario of investing in a duplex? I want to get into that here in a moment. This morning here on Financial News and Talk on the Craig Brock Real Estate Program, we have Terry Lewis with us with Seller Finance Consultants. He can help you get into a home of your own with seller carryback financing, even if the seller of the property, the current seller of the property, is unwilling to do so. He has a strategy that can help you, that can make all of the difference. If you're self-employed, if you have a Schedule C where you have a significant amount of write-offs, he has a solution for you when the bank says no. Let's face it, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Chase, they're not a bad place to have a checking account, but when it comes to a home mortgage, they make it so tough. You've got all the W-2s and the pay stubs and the last couple of years' tax returns. They want a letter if you had a late payment on a credit card several years ago. And gosh forbid if you owe money to the IRS, or maybe you pay alimony or child support. It just seems like they don't want to help you out. They don't want to help the little guy. When you go to a direct lender, certainly it's a lot easier because you peel back the overlays. You take off all of that red tape. If Fannie Mae is willing to buy you based on the algorithm, the electronic algorithm, here at Rancho Financial, we say yes. But let's face it, we can't say yes to everybody because there are people out there that have negative Schedule Cs. They'll have a Schedule E for rental property. All of a sudden, that Schedule E, it looks pretty good on paper because what happens is that you have that depreciation that you take over 27.5 years, and it effectively wipes out the profit but gives you a nice tax deduction. But when you go down to the banks aren't so friendly. That's why you want seller-financed homes that can help you. That's why we have Terry Lewis. Terry, I want to get into the concept of buying a duplex because, let's face it, it looks pretty attractive to me. If I can buy a duplex property, I can live on one side, and then I can rent the other out, and then the rent that I get on that second unit can offset what I'm paying for my side of the duplex. What's your opinion on that? Is that flawed thinking?
No, that's an awesome strategy. And I've actually put people into situations like that where actually if you get a millennial or anybody for that matters that wants to buy a house, they can rent the other, or a duplex, they can rent the other side out. But also they have roommates. And we just last Saturday went to a barbecue where a home that we sold, the homeowner has a $400 a month payment because he has two roommates, and this can be done with seller financing with no loans, from the banks at all. The seller can carry the loan. All you really need is to find the property and get started.
Excellent advice. Terry, it seems difficult for me to even go to a Padres game anymore without hearing about reverse mortgages. Maybe it's a Padres game, maybe it's a jazz concert. Anywhere I go, even when I turn the TV on or the radio, it seems like I'm hearing about these reverse mortgages. There's a lot to know about them. They can be great concepts. They can be terrific tools to help you get into a home if you're age 62 or better. But let's face it, many family members are against them, and a lot of times the family members have a lot of say, especially if you're age 75 or maybe age 80 or better. You actually have a solution that can basically offer the same type of a concept. Now, you do have payments, but if someone's had a previous short sale or foreclosure, they might be considering this reverse mortgage in order to get into a home, to get into their permanent residence. Does Seller Finance Consultants work for that kind of a scenario?
Well, I'm not a fan of reverse mortgages. It puts a burden on the homeowner that they have to actually be a owner occupant, and people that are elderly, you know, uh, that might be okay for, the next year or two or 5 years. But what if someone falls down and then has to go into convalescence, or things happen when people get older, and once you leave that house that reverse mortgage is on, then the mortgage becomes due. You can't rent it out, and it's just such a burden, and people don't see the whole picture. It might sound good to begin with, but if they could actually, with seller financing, they could carry the loan on that, and sell the home or do a lease option, and have that cash flow, and and support the elderly person with that cash flow. And it's much more than the banks are offering. They're offering, up to maybe 2% interest. And on a seller finance loan, that the seller is carrying that, they're actually getting, we're writing loans up to 8% right now, and that's just a tremendous advantage.
But Terry, it can't all be flawed with these reverse mortgages. We go to the Padres game, or all these different events, and they seem to be touting these reverse mortgages really heavily. You just can't avoid the advertising. And if someone falls down in their home, or let's face it, if one of the borrowers dies, well, if there's a single borrower and they pass away, the family has a whole year to sell the house. The reverse mortgage isn't going to come in there the next month and sell the property. They have some time, don't they?
Yeah, I believe so. And I'm not real versed on them, because I just didn't see why anybody would want to put their whole house, at risk for a loan for a stream of payments, when you could actually, you know, in the past, borrow the money on maybe a second trust deed, and pull the money out, put it in a bank account, and achieve the same results, and not tie up the house. Now we're into a different scenario where seller financing can do the same thing. So there's some positives I that I understand on it. However, it's just every situation, every person needs to really look at it, and decide if it's for them or not.
Well, you mentioned risk, and most people don't want to have any association with risk when it comes to putting your home at risk. So certainly that's a good reason to avoid a reverse mortgage, or at least make sure that you do the proper due diligence, because it's a long-term strategy. It's not a strategy that you're going to use just for the next few years or 5 years. Hopefully, if it's a strategy that you'll be willing to use for the next 10 years, if you even determine that that's the appropriate course of action. But Terry, after listening to your strategy with the seller financed concept, it sounds like it's a better concept because one can benefit from arbitrage. And let's face it, benefiting from arbitrage is fantastic, because that's how the banks make their money. That's how the banks have been able to persevere through this credit crisis. And it looks like they're benefiting from arbitrage here this week. We have interest rates that I mentioned at the top of the broadcast that are at the low of the year. This is fantastic news to go into the month of June with, because we have a huge pullback. We have 2.47 on the 10-year Treasury, and we have many financial news commentators and experts indicating that interest rates are still too high. Why would someone say that? Well, when you look at bond yields around the world, when you look at Germany and Spain and some of these other developing nations, they have bond yields that are only maybe about 0.5% or 0.75% higher than our terrific paper here in America. So that means that potentially these bond yields have the potential of going a little bit lower. If they go lower, that means mortgage rates go lower. But if you can't get a loan, that's the premise of this broadcast. If the bank says no and you can't get a loan, you want to know seller finance consultants. These opportunities that you've been able to uncover in the Southland, Terry, have been terrific. I don't know anyone in the nation that's able to find property that's available with seller carryback financing, especially along the beach. You had two of them that you indicated last week in Solana Beach. You had another property that was in Chula Vista that was just a fantastic scenario. It was a multifamily scenario where the seller of the property wasn't advertising that they were willing to carry back the financing, but what happened is that you were actually able to come in and acquire the property and then finance it for the new buyer. That's the whole ideology of this program, is that that's what makes it possible for our listeners to purchase any property in the MLS, any property that's potentially for sale with seller carryback financing. And I know I said that rather quickly there, Terry, but I want to get listeners to give you a call that are actively engaged in the marketplace that want to know more about this concept, or better yet, to check you out on the web in advance. I want to get your website out there.
So yes, sellerfinanceconsultants.com is our website address, sellerfinanceconsultants.com, and our phone number is 619-786-6550. And I just have to say that if anybody has been turned down on a loan, and I think that represents about a third of the buying population out there, give us a call and see if seller financing is an alternative for them getting into the home of their dreams. It's something that is an alternative, and it's not reinventing the wheel. It's been alive for many, many years, and it's just basically the seller becoming the bank.
Well, as what happens, we have the most affluent, the smartest listeners on radio because we're part of the Bloomberg network. A lot of them know the right questions to ask when they come into my office, and this one particular gentleman asked the question about being able to use rental income to qualify, rental income to offset the payment. Now, here's that gig. The scenario is that if you have an existing property that you wish to move out of and you want to use rental income to help you qualify to purchase the new property, that rental income doesn't have to be on your tax returns. You don't have to have necessarily a 2-year history of receiving that rental income. But here's the problem. You have to be able to show that you have 30% equity in the property in order for Fannie Mae to allow you to use that rental income to qualify. That's the caveat that prevents many people from qualifying for a home mortgage. That's why I encourage you to check out Seller Finance Consultants. Terry, we just have about a minute left here. I know you'll be back with us on tomorrow's broadcast. But for consumers that want to get into a property, these properties that you have available, they're available throughout the Southland. There's a lot to know. I know there's also the fact that how safe is this concept. Real quick, I just want to have you mention who collects the money in this situation, who handles the monthly cash flow.
Well, there's a servicer that's a third neutral party, similar to an escrow, that will collect the payments and then put the money into the seller's bank account or any other entities that need to be paid. So it's very safe, and that servicer also does the 1098s for tax purposes and things like that. So it's very, very safe, and it's common. It's just not hasn't been promoted because we haven't needed to do this in the past. But it's here, and it's going to be here to stay.
It's safe. You're completely licensed. This is a strategy that's been around for 3 decades. There's a lot to love about this. Well, Terry, I do appreciate your contribution this morning on Financial News and Talk.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You bet, and we'll certainly have you back tomorrow to learn more details about how you can benefit from seller-financed homes, how you can use this concept to purchase any property on the MLS. And if you want to see what home ownership looks like, I would encourage you to check out my website at craigbrockmortgage.com. You might also check out my Facebook page, Craig Brock, for more information. Look forward to talking to you again tomorrow about seller finance strategies. Have a terrific day.